At exactly 11:11 on a Sunday morning, restaurant owner Elena Martinez stepped outside carrying a bag of trash when she noticed a bright orange sticker slapped across the front window of her SUV. At first, she thought somebody had vandalized her car, but as she walked closer, her stomach dropped. The sticker read, "HOA Enforcement Notice, Unauthorized Vehicle Use." Beneath it was another warning threatening daily fines of $500 until a vehicle was removed permanently. Elena stood frozen in her driveway while neighbors stared from across the street. The SUV wasn't abandoned or damaged. It simply had magnets on the side advertising her small family restaurant downtown. But according to HOA President Diane Cooper, the magnets made Elena's vehicle a commercial nuisance that violated community standards. And within weeks, the fight over those magnets would spiral into lawsuits, hidden HOA corruption, and one public HOA meeting residents would never forget. Elena was a 40-year-old single mother who owned a small Mexican restaurant, struggling to recover after several difficult years. Her restaurant barely survived the pandemic, and she worked almost every day trying to keep the business alive. The magnets on her SUV simply displayed the restaurant logo and phone number. They weren't loud or oversized. In fact, several other residents parked company vehicles in the neighborhood without problems. One neighbor owned a plumbing van. Another regularly parked a landscaping truck outside his house. But after Diane Cooper became HOA president, Elena suddenly became a target. Diane treated the neighborhood like a luxury country club instead of a normal suburban community. She constantly complained about decorations, parked cars, trash cans, and lawns. Residents slowly realized she enjoyed controlling people. But she especially disliked Elena because the restaurant occasionally catered neighborhood events, making Elena popular with residents. Diane hated not being the center of attention. The first warning notice arrived 3 days after Diane spotted the SUV parked outside Elena's home. Elena politely contacted the HOA office, explaining the vehicle was her personal car and the magnets were removable advertisements for her business. Diane didn't care. She claimed the SUV lowered neighborhood appearance standards and demanded the magnets be removed immediately. Elena pointed out that several other residents parked work vehicles without receiving violations. Diane ignored the comparison entirely. Soon, the situation escalated quickly. Elena began receiving violation notices almost weekly. One claimed the SUV created visual commercial disruption. Another accused Elena of operating a business from home, even though the restaurant was located miles away downtown. The HOA started adding legal processing fees onto every notice. Within 2 months, Elena somehow owed over $6,000 in fines. Things became humiliating after Diane started publicly targeting Elena during HOA meetings. At one meeting, Diane projected enlarged photographs of Elena's SUV onto a screen, while calling the restaurant advertising cheap roadside-style marketing. Several residents looked uncomfortable listening to it. Elena calmly explained she was simply trying to support her family and keep her restaurant open, but Diane interrupted repeatedly and accused Elena of refusing community standards. Then she made a major mistake. In front of everyone, Diane joked that if the restaurant failed, the magnets would disappear anyway. The room immediately went silent. Even several board members looked shocked. After that meeting, support for Elena spread quietly throughout the neighborhood. Many residents actually loved her restaurant and were furious hearing Diane mock her publicly. Then another homeowner came forward revealing Diane had never fined her friend's cleaning company van parked outside daily. People slowly realized the rules weren't being enforced equally. Diane was selectively targeting homeowners she personally disliked. Meanwhile, Elena's restaurant started struggling even more because she was spending thousands fighting HOA fines. One evening, her teenage son overheard her crying while reviewing unpaid bills at the kitchen table. That moment convinced Elena to finally hire an attorney named Rachel Kim, who specialized in HOA disputes. Rachel immediately noticed suspicious patterns in the violation history. Several notices lacked proper documentation, and some penalties violated state HOA regulations entirely. Rachel formally requested HOA financial records and internal communications related to vehicle enforcement. Diane refused repeatedly and accused Elena of trying to intimidate the board legally. That refusal turned out to be a huge mistake. A former HOA treasurer named Bill Harper privately contacted Rachel after hearing about the case. Bill had resigned months earlier after arguments with Diane regarding HOA spending. According to Bill, Diane regularly approved selective fines against residents she personally disliked. Worse, Bill suspected HOA money was being misused entirely. He still possessed copies of financial spreadsheets and internal emails. Some records showed HOA funds paying for expensive dinners, spa visits, and luxury office furniture, supposedly connected to community management expenses. One email shocked everyone involved. Diane directly referred to Elena as the taco lady destroying neighborhood standards and instructed another board member to keep increasing pressure until compliance happens. Rachel immediately filed legal motions demanding full HOA transparency. Panic quickly spread through the HOA board. Diane suddenly became defensive during every meeting and blamed misinformation campaigns started by angry residents. But homeowners no longer trusted her. More people started sharing their own stories about selective enforcement and intimidation. One resident had been fined over holiday decorations, while Diane's friends received no warnings for identical decorations. Another homeowner was threatened over a trailer parked temporarily during home repairs, while Diane ignored similar violations from neighbors she liked. Then, local media became interested in Elena's story as residents posted HOA documents online. A small news station interviewed Elena outside her restaurant, and the story spread rapidly across social media. People were furious seeing a struggling single mother threatened with thousands in fines over removable car magnets. Business at Elena's restaurant actually increased afterwards because residents across town wanted to support her. But Diane's problems were only beginning. Investigators eventually uncovered something far worse than selective enforcement. HOA financial records revealed Diane approved thousands of unauthorized spending tied to a marketing company secretly owned by her brother. Even worse, that same marketing company had been hired to create expensive community branding campaigns nobody in the neighborhood even knew existed. Residents realized HOA money had been disappearing for months, while Diane aggressively fined homeowners over tiny violations. At the next HOA meeting, angry residents packed the clubhouse so tightly people stood outside listening through open windows. Diane attempted to start the meeting normally, but homeowners immediately interrupted her with questions about missing funds and selective enforcement. One resident projected financial records on a wall, showing suspicious payments connected to Diane's family. Another read Diane's insulting emails aloud in front of the crowd. The atmosphere became chaotic fast. Then someone near the entrance shouted that county investigators had arrived. Seconds later, officials entered the room alongside sheriff deputies carrying evidence boxes. The room fell completely silent as investigators informed the board they were seizing HOA financial records related to fraud allegations. Diane's face instantly lost color, while deputies carried computers and binders out of the HOA office. Within weeks, multiple lawsuits were filed against the HOA and Diane personally. Diane resigned as HOA president shortly afterwards, while continuing to deny wrongdoing publicly. Meanwhile, Elena's fines were dismissed completely, and the HOA was forced to reimburse legal expenses for several residents. Eventually, new HOA elections were held under outside supervision, and major reforms were introduced limiting HOA enforcement powers moving forward. But the moment residents remembered most happened several months later during the neighborhood's annual summer festival. Elena parked her SUV directly in front of the clubhouse, with the restaurant magnet still proudly displayed on both sides. This time, instead of complaints, residents lined up around the block to buy food from her restaurant stand, while cheering as she served customers with a smile on her face.